name's Dennis Daly, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And today is January 8th, 2008. We're at the main library, and I have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Mr. Herschell Hall. Our camera operator today is Colleen Phillips. Mr. Hall, thank you very much for agreeing to come down and talk with us. And usually with these interviews, I like to start off, give us a little background on where you were born and how you came to become into the service.
Well, I was born in Kentucky, February the 26th, 1925, and the biggest place is Pulaski County, and whistle stop at that place. My father was a railroad telegraph operator, and so I lived there 11 months. Then they moved to Tennessee, lived in Tennessee 11 months, and back to Kentucky. That Dad was placed at Danville for telegraph operator.
Okay.
And later, he was promoted and moved to the Union Terminal. And that's was when all of the military was, thousands went through every day. And Dad was one of the traffic controllers there. So at 17, I dropped out of school, and I asked my father to send me to Knoxville, Tennessee. They had a school with diesel engines. And he says, "You're only 17, and I think you should get a little age on you before you start making lifetime deals." So Dad didn't support me to attend the diesel school. So I get in the Navy at 17.
And this was just
February the 26th.
This was just a few months after Pearl Harbor, correct?
Well, this is 40.
February 42?
42.
It's just a couple of months after Pearl Harbor.
Well, that was in December of 41.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a year.
Okay.
But I was just 17, so I couldn't have done anything February the 26th, and I was in the Navy by that time.
Okay. So you signed up for the Navy at 17?
At 17.
And you had to get your parents' permission, I'm assuming, or...
And my mother would have refused, and but Kentucky would accept either mother or father, but Tennessee would accept father. So Dad was moved immediately to Rockwood, Tennessee, and Rockwood was the rail front for the building of the atomic plant.
Okay, yeah.
And so he was kind of a traffic controller and freight. Like he said, it didn't matter. They had hundreds of freight cars shipped in and invariably, when whatever it was needed for building of that atomic plant,
In Oak Ridge?
In Oak Ridge. The rail center was Rockwood, Tennessee.
Okay.
And it's just a few miles, but removed, and close but not too close.
So he was the traffic controller to get all
He
the
was the traffic
materials
controller there.
Okay, wow.
And like he said, it didn't matter what they wanted. It was always, if there was 100 in line, it would be the 50th one from either end. So they had to move all those freight cars to get what was on that, because when they put them in there, they didn't follow a pattern. They knew where they were, but for safety and at that time, security, they would just, everything had a number, and they knew where the numbers were, but there was no sequence. So they would have to get the hands-on deal to move these freight cars from the shortest end and remove it, because that would be one that had critical parts
Oh,
for
wow.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
So were you in Rockdale when you enlisted into the Navy? Were you living in Tennessee at that time, or?
No, I never, no. We lived at 2339 Indian Mount Avenue
Okay.
in Norwood. Dad was, at that time, earlier, at the Union Terminal. He was a
Okay.
telegraph operator at Union Terminal. And then this super secret deal at Oak Ridge, Tennessee developed. And Dad qualified. And he came home one day and said, well, I don't have a job anymore. So my mother said, now what did you do this time? He says, well, I've been transferred to Rockwood, Tennessee. He said, what in the world is down in Rockwood, Tennessee? He said, I don't know, but I'll find out. The railroad says it's for duration, so
Okay.
find a place to live. And
So he knew that this was military, something military, because he was going to be there for the duration
that
of
was,
the war.
no, that was super secret, because that was atomic plant
Sure.
that was being built. And at that time, very few people even knew what it was.
Right, right.
And that was in 1943.
Okay, so you had already enlisted at this point. So let's get back.
January the 5th of 1943,
Okay,
I went in the Navy,
okay.
raised my hand.
And where did you enlist? Were you in?
I went to Great Lakes.
Okay, so that's where you went for boot camp up to Great Lakes. So what was boot camp like for you?
What was?
What was boot camp like? Did you enjoy boot camp, or?
Oh, I had, well, it hadn't snowed in Cincinnati. But when we get to Chicago, it starts snowing in Chicago, and I didn't see the ground for 13 weeks. And we had 13 weeks of boot camp at Great Lakes. And it was, so I got my initiation with the snow and ice.
Now, were you on the parade grounds outside in the snow, marching, things like that?
Everything. We had, well, they had Quonset huts, a big oval shape, and because they were, at that time, the quickest thing they could build. And that's where we slept, and everything is in Quonset huts. And we'd get out in the morning time, and it would be wind chill factor probably 30 or 40 below zero. And it didn't make any difference.
That's right.
We had 13 weeks of it.
I've often been curious. Now, at that time, it's wartime.
It's war.
And there's a huge number of sailors coming through. Was there a lot of overcrowding? I mean, were there a huge number of people at Great Lakes, or?
Well, I think it was organized confusion. That was Great Lakes was a permanent thing, built prior to the war. But the housing and all of that was Quonset huts. And that was people exploded. But the schools, the training was in permanent buildings.
Okay.
So we didn't walk in that snow and everything all the time.
Okay.
But and they had organized classrooms, and it was organized confusion. Everybody had to read and study the Blue Jackets manual, and we had just one after another of brains that some were retired, and others were from the Great Lake basketball team. Was from everybody in the United States. But James Van Arsdale, the son of our landlord, was on the team at Great Lakes.
Okay.
And when he'd come over to see me, he'd be admirals and captains, and he was a basketball player. Of course, he was a lieutenant by rank, but he was one of the good basketball players on the Great Lakes. And he visited me about once a week. And it was nothing for him to be coming over there with the captain or more, one on each side of him. And because he was a prize guy.
Yeah.
James Van Arsdale was one of the better of the basketball on the Great Lakes basketball team when that was the basketball team in the nation.
Okay.
And but he'd come over to visit me about once a week because his father always followed up about how's Herschell doing.
Oh, that's great.
Now, I always felt that I got a lot of privileges, and I never asked for none, but I always thought it was the influence of the visitor that I had weekly.
So you were noticing special treatment after he would leave,
yeah.
and they would notice. Okay.
But I just smiled and went along with it.
Sure. So after your 13 weeks are up at Great Lakes, then did you get assigned immediately there, or did you go to more training after?
They really did put us through fit the round peg and the round hole. We took AQT tests, every kind of a test that could be administered to find out your intelligence, your potential, and what have you. And everything pointed to what I had tried to get my dad to send me to diesel school, and that was then the big thing. And all I had to say really is, what do you want? And I'd say diesel. And then I proceeded to qualify. And I did go to diesel school.
Okay.
In fact, I went to 3 diesel schools.
Where were they located?
Well, at Great Lakes.
Okay.
Navy here in Chicago. Navy, when I say Great Lakes was over, we came to the, got our leave to come home. And following that, we went back to Great Lakes and then sent to the schools or wherever, what the assignment was. Because we had our basic training, and then we had our last goodbye at home. And but we came back to Great Lakes, and then from that point on, that was a staging. And I went down to Navy here in Chicago.
Okay.
And Navy here in Chicago has always surprised me at how big it was, but how organized it was. And so I took it on myself. I learned early, if you want to look busy and not rub anybody in the wrong way, just carry a clipboard with a ruler or what have you and move. So I counted all of the, they had 3 tier 4 and 5 tier bunks, believe it or not, at Great Lakes. And we had 11 miles of beds. Now you take a bed that's 6 foot long, multiply it out, you get your total, and then multiply it out. But there was over 11 miles of and the single foot to head, 11 miles of people sleeping, and it was generally full.
So you went to diesel school, and what kind of stuff did you learn there? Were you working on the engines, or?
We probably had, and I can't think of his name, and from St. Louis. Gee, I didn't think I'd ever forget it. Owned and manufactured the diesel engines in St. Louis. And he furnished his own transportation. He took no money, and he appeared and taught 3 days a week at Navy Pier or in Chicago, at some diesel, because the diesel engine at the Museum of Arts and Science, and they had a cutaway diesel engine that was given to the Navy by this gentleman from St. Louis, and he was the instructor. And that was, without a doubt, the best qualified man that I ever met in the field. And now fast forward for about 50 years, I was listening, my granddaughter was born. And I'm playing with her, and it's a St. Louis, well, I don't know what the occasion was, but the military had diesel engines. And I heard this voice, and I've heard that voice before, and it was the instructor.
Oh, wow.
And here he was retiring from the, turning over the leadership of the Bush-Shelter company in St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't heard that voice in years and years, but
Took you right back.
it took me right back. And it had to be the best qualified man that I ever met, or ever was. And of course, it was a kind of a little bit of a hero worship. And I spent all my free time down at that Arts and Science Museum because they had cutaways.
Okay.
So instead of going in and getting a beer or what have you in town, I had a good friend of mine, and I would go down and study the diesel engines.
That's good.
So,
yeah. Good way to spend your time.
it was, well, we didn't spend all the time there, but it was always, you see something new every time. And that's the way I spent my time in Class A diesel school.
Okay.
Then the top 10% got the advanced. They got, so to speak, awarded. And it was the top 10%. And sent to Detroit, Michigan for a month.
Okay.
And we went into the Gray Marine Diesel School. And in Detroit, the military, well, the Naval Reserve grounds was on Jefferson Avenue. And the factory was in Jefferson Avenue, just about 3 or 4 blocks from where we slept and what have you. And that was for 4 weeks. And that's where we learned diesel engines. So 671s. The 71 is the size of the cylinder, 71 cubic inches. And the 271s, 2-cylinder, 4-cylinder, and 6-cylinders. Now the Navy used the 6 cylinders for propulsion and for generators. So you learn that one engine and the cylinder, and the 6 would be the 6-cylinder.
Now, just out of curiosity, I think you're the first person I've ever talked to or met that was in Detroit during World War II. Did you get a chance to get into the town much? That must have really been a bustling town during the war.
Well, it was Chicago.
Oh, it was Chicago. Okay.
It's Chicago.
Okay. I thought you said
So I went to school in Chicago for the 3 full months.
Right.
And that was Class A.
Right, and then you went to Detroit.
Class B went to Detroit.
So what was Detroit? Was Detroit a very bustling town because of the all the car manufacturers were making military supplies,
Yeah.
Right,
Right,
so
right.
that must have been interesting.
Now the Great Marine Diesel School, that was a factory in itself. And it was there for just 1 month.
Okay.
And they had a organized confusion. We walked in, and there was 5 diesel engines in the circle. And as they went down, called your name, they give you a number. And that was how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, every 5th one. So you get number 1, you see. And number 1 got by the number 1 diesel. And that's, so again, it was not planned who was in that team. And you take those diesel engines, Great Marine Diesel and the factory school. And once the sorted out and you knew that, like I drew number 1, diesel.
Okay.
So every time that they put a new man in, they could, put 10 or they could put 110, as long as they had to equal. And each engine had a toolbox, testing and all that. Each one had identical the same. And that toolbox followed by the company, put that package. So wherever you went with the diesel engine, you pick up the toolbox, and it had everything, every nut, bolt, screw, everything. They had a tool there that you could take a diesel apart, put it back together.
Okay.
And we did that. And we had 4 weeks. So all of these engines, each team, you could take a picture. You was given a paper and a pencil. You could write down anything you want, draw any picture, anything that could help to put something in your brain and then be able to retrieve it. And you take it apart, and you can do anything with it you want except scratch it or ruin it. And when you drew your picture, when everybody had seen it, you could go look at it, it went into this circle. And then you're going to have to use the micrometers and what have you and put those things back together.
Okay. So that's what you were doing in Detroit was?
In Detroit
4 weeks.
for 4 weeks. Now we took those diesels apart, tested them, did everything, and got them back together. And as a team, 3 of them was fine, but 2 of them had some parts.
Oh, really?
Now what they did, so I learned later, they had those things with, well, now everything can be done, but that was kind of to etch anything into steel was almost visible. But that's where they had advanced that, where it was invisible. So you put it under a light and it came out.
Okay.
So they knew the number. And so they didn't have to test anything but to look at that number. So they go in at night when we weren't there, and they would never tell you that, hey, this number 1 and number 3's got parts crossed. Because we were using micrometers, physically. So that is we had to do that, get our engines back together and run them.
Okay.
Operation. So it was 1, 3, and 5 were okay, 2 and 4, and then we all had to get those 2 work as a team. Now it wasn't just each engine, now it was together to find out which part belonged to which engine.
Okay. And did you?
And the old-fashioned micrometer deal, because we didn't have any lights or anything to cheat to find out. They had it.
Right.
We could,
so did you get 2 and 4 running?
just eventually.
Okay.
And then at the end of 4 weeks, we went out on the Detroit River and operated the 671 diesel engines on the flat 36-foot landing craft.
Okay.
It had three diesel. Now the larger ones had 6, but they'd have 4 or 5 diesels. And but we did it to Detroit River, and wouldn't you know it, that's when the riots started.
Oh, really?
And I was in Detroit when the riots were all started.
Wow. What happened there? Did they get you out of there?
Well, we were confined to schoolrooms or the barracks. And if you had friends, now I had an uncle, Uncle Tom Salee was a detective of the Detroit Police Department. Now Uncle Tom had a vehicle, and was blood relative, so to speak. And so he kind of came to all my free time. Uncle Tom picked me up. And the 4 weeks I was in Detroit, I was at Uncle Tom's house with my cousins. And, for the month, so it didn't hurt me at all, to be confined, because I got out of there. I had all the free time. I had a place to go.
Okay.
Uncle Tom, all he had to do was come into the gate, identify himself, detective, and with, of course, after the first, they had my name and everything, and they called me out. I spent a weekend with Uncle Tom Sleep. My deal in Detroit was heaven.
So where did you go after Detroit? What was the next move?
I went to Little Creek, Virginia.
Okay. Is this for more diesel school, or are you now assigned to a...
We were operational.
Okay.
And we got into at Virginia Beach, Virginia. It was an LCI, Landing Craft Infantry.
Okay.
It looked like a little destroyer, and it's about 100 feet long, and it would hold a little over 100 people. This is troops, and so we would go to a landing, pull it in, take 100 troops on, then take them up to Virginia Beach, Ocean View, or wherever that was their spot for a landing. Because all of that place was, under the military now. And so we go in, and that is where the good Lord took care of me. We had offloaded our 121 troops and started to back off. Now these are about 100 foot long, looked like a miniature destroyer, and there was only 11 men in the crew. And mine, since I was an engineman, was at the stern. Because when you start to go into land, you drop an anchor. You had 100 yards, 300 feet of an anchor and chain. And you had to have something to help pull you off of this. When you go into the beach, you take your ballast, and your ship was like this, because you'd put the weight in the back. All the water went to the back, would raise it, and then it'd go up on the beach. And then when it got in it, then you'd pump your water back, and your ship would be like this. And then nobody was thrown off or anything.
Okay.
Now, after the landing, which is 121 troops, I know this was Army or Marines, and I was at the stern, and that is where I got, well, nature there was a tank, and how it got there, I don't know. It did not bother us when we went in. But
tank underwater that was sunk?
Army tank.
Okay, that was
military tank, submerged.
Okay.
Now we went in, offloaded, and then I went back at the bottom. We were going to bring the ship off of the beach. And the tail of it, of course, the waves and everything is choppy at Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it had a different angle than when we went in. And when we came back out, I'm there on this little 121-foot deal. I'm alone, and I've got the controls for this winding this chain. And all of a sudden, the ship came to a stop, dumped me, and I came out with a broken tail.
Okay, you had hit the tank? You had hit the tank when you were backing out? The ship had hit the tank when you were backing out?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
threw you off the back of the ship?
Yeah, I was in the back and I was thrown. And
Okay.
it came to a stop and dumped me, and I landed on that tank and cracked the tail bone. And well, again, I had a cyst. The bruise, the cyst. Now that meant surgery. So I left the ship, and they sent me up to Virginia Beach, Virginia. No. Solomon's, Maryland. It was halfway between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. was a military camp that had been hurried up and changed to a hospital.
Okay.
So I went under surgery, but they couldn't, they didn't have super glue at that time. They didn't have any a lot of things. So what they did was pack, because of that cyst, they had to carve out all of that. And so consequently, I spent 5 months in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And that was, of course, I worked and studied and everything, but now I'm in the hospital. And I go up to the library and I get every book they've got, every that applied to me in my rank. And for 5 months, I used all of my time studying, reading every book that had a question and answers and what have you. I studied it. And then from that point on, I exposed myself to every test given. But I spent 5 months in the hospital.
Wow.
And from the hospital, that's how I use my time.
Okay.
Is studying. And after that healed and what have you, and I was to be discharged from the hospital, the two doctors, Dr. Warren and Dr. Girardi, in 1942 had, from Johns Hopkins Hospital, had been nationally acclaimed for their work done in the sterile technique of surgery, hospitals, in 1940. And these are the two doctors that performed surgery on me.
Wow.
Two of the best.
Good hands.
And of course, I had an injury there that they couldn't do much about because of the cysts. And so it comes 5 months, and I'm to be discharged. They called me in and they said, you know, we can get a pension for you and take a discharge. And I says, sorry, I don't want out of the Navy. I said, you know, it wasn't my fault that I got hurt. I missed a big point here. About 6 weeks to 2 months after I got into the hospital, I picked up the All Hands magazine, and there's a familiar name. Now, as I'm talking about it now, if you can see it, my whole body's cold chills. I'm the only survivor of the LCI 521. It went to Italy, Salerno, Italy, and was annihilated.
Oh, really?
It went in. The Germans had gotten there at Salerno, and it fortified and there's mountain ranges, and they had armies between each of the mountain ranges, just waiting because they didn't know where there would be a landing. Well, our side didn't know that the Germans was so fortified. So they sent just in a trial run, no intentions of landing anything, but they got in close, and before they could get out, the Germans from the land and both directions of the sea annihilated everything.
And this was
The other 21 on the ship, I'm the only survivor.
That's the ship that you were training on when you got injured.
It was the ship that I was training.
And everyone was killed on that. Wow.
Now, little side, 2 years ago, I couldn't have said this. I was on September the 5th. I remembered September the 5th, Salerno, Italy. And if I'd have been there, I'd have been killed, like the others. So I went out to the backyard, and my neighbor, again, 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't have said this. A guy by the name of Ray Lamb, my neighbor, for 33 years, and he said, "Herschell, what are you so happy about?" I said, "Well, Ray," I said, had I not been hurt in a hospital, I'd have been killed in Salerno, Italy. Now, we were about 10 foot apart when this conversation started. And next thing I know, we're eyeball to eyeball, nose to nose. And he says, "Well, how do you know all of this that took place in Salerno, Italy?" I said, "Well, I was in the hospital. And all the rest of that crew were killed at Salerno. I read every book and talked with everybody at his ship." Ray says, "Herschell, that was 33 years ago." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "I was on an aircraft carrier 7 miles away from you. I saw what you just described to me."
Wow.
He said, "That's why I started." I said, "Ray, we've lived here for 33 years. I never said to you, and you never said anything to me." He was on an aircraft carrier, the communication, and all of these killed in action. He was communication from the aircraft carrier that put the letter back home, killed in action. He handled that from the aircraft carrier.
Wow. And he lived.
Here we lived together. We played baseball for 33 years, and I didn't talk and he didn't talk. Well, now we talk. So.
Wow, that's
one of these little things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he said to me, "How did you avoid this?" And of course, I had to now tell Ray about what I just repeated to you. I was injured. So the good Lord just took care of me.
Sure, absolutely. So now the doctor's saying they can discharge you. You say absolutely not. You want to stay in the Navy.
Oh, okay. They said, "Well, we can't force you." I said, You can discharge me for any way you want to kick me out. I don't want to go. I want to go back on duty." And now I had to go through those 2 doctors and settle them. And then I said to them, "Now, wouldn't I be the biggest heel in the world, doctor?" I said, "My family has 4 girls and a boy. I'm the baby. And I have a sister that's an Army nurse that in 1942 was in Europe in an Army hospital, and one of the 1,000-plane raids over London hit the hospital, not the hospital. They hit the surrounding area, 30 acres. I've been there. And she was hit from a bombing of shrapnel. That was my sister Norma. Of course, I didn't have any idea at that time. And this is telling me the fact. And then my other sister was in the Navy in Millington, Tennessee, and she was an aviation machinist mate, and she rebuilt carburetors. And it's a whole story there. She would sign her name to, if she rebuilt a carburetor, she would put Becky Hall. And so the users of these at Millington, Tennessee, on the C-47s. They'd come in and stand and bring their carburetors in and wait for her to rebuild, establish, initially.
Well, hello. I'm Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project that is so capably done here at our public library in Cincinnati. And of course, Dennis Daly is our videographer and one of the top historians here in our history department. And he's been talking with Herschell Hall, U.S. Navy veteran of World War II. And I've just been brought up to date on your first hour interview, Herschell. What an honor it is to meet you and to speak with you. And it's just wonderful to hear your story. And being an old Navy guy myself, I can appreciate so much of it, although I was in the South Pacific and you were in the ETO. Now, we're at the point where you are about to come to England, or you're in England now preparing for the D-Day landings in Normandy, is that correct?
Right, correct.
So we're talking 1944. Early 44.
Early
because,
40. Well, I can tell you the date.
All right, let's go.
Easter Sunday morning.
Okay, April.
We went into New York from, of course, I'm back up, from the Gulf of Mexico, around Florida to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine it was Pier 100, I believe, or
Okay.
it was thereabout. And it was Easter Sunday morning of 1944. The fog is so thick that we can't, nobody was in their sack. Everybody was out.
On deck, watching.
And it was you stretched arm's length around the line, the cable.
Right.
You was either operating seamanship or you were a lookout.
Right.
And you were 6 foot from fingertip to fingertip around to look at when we go into New York Harbor, because I remember there was 3 little tugs and we were going about maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour up the Hudson River. And fog is so thick you can't see your hand in front of you.
Right.
And so right as we are getting by the Statue of Liberty in New York, the sun is coming up, red glow, and the fog lifts. And as the fog lifts, it unveils the Statue of Liberty on Easter Sunday morning in New York Harbor.
What a sight. What a sight.
What I've lived with that beautiful, most beautiful thing I've ever seen was that shroud unveiled the Statue of Liberty, and we were going about 1 or 2 miles an hour. And when it unveils, and there's the Statue of Liberty.
And there you were, and on Easter morning, resurrection.
Easter Sunday morning.
Resurrection and the unveiling of the Lady Liberty.
It's just beyond me, the beauty that.
I have never heard a story like that. That is just.
And then we go into the harbor. Now it was either Pier 100 or because we had a husband and wife.
Now you were on an LST.
I was on an LST 522.
522.
Built in 30 miles from downtown Chicago.
What an experience. Oh my goodness. Now how long were you in New York before you went over?
About 3 days.
About 3 days.
Now, we were tied up at the pier.
Mm-hmm.
And they came through and they said, everybody pack your bags and get ready to abandon ship.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody, and he said, if you have a handkerchief and it's wet and you want to leave it, don't want it, throw it in the trash can. Or put it in put it in your pocket. You may not come back to this ship.
Oh.
Now everybody packed up their bags to get ready to go. And they said, don't leave a handkerchief because you won't kiss it goodbye. So we went out and went into a Quonset hut. And there was, I met 3 or 4 of the biggest, meanest SPs that they could get. And we walked in, and here you are with your 150 pounds of clothing and everything on your every earthly possession.
Right.
And go in. And one question. Now you walked in, and nobody but these intimidators were there. And you had one question. Are you a smoker or non-smoker? And if you were a smoker, you went out that exit, and you didn't go back to your ship. The non-smokers was what we went over and was interrogated by 3 intimidators, and they wanted to know, are you lying? Do you smoke? Have you smoked? And if they declared that you were a non-smoker, then you picked up your all earthly possessions and went back on the 522.
Okay.
My ship was a 522 at the time.
Right. Well, interesting.
And so we went back, and there was, in the engine room and everything else, was people that you never saw before. But they shuffled the cards, so to speak, and
the non-smokers.
And non-smokers. Well, then we find out what our crew, we are petroleum products.
Oh, okay.
Our LST, and if it was a 50-gallon, or 30, 40, and 50-gallon drums, and then everything else, and some of it was bulk petroleum. Some of it had to be processed
refined
in England, because it was just pure as it came out of the oil field.
Sure.
And we haul that ship.
Highly volatile.
Highly volatile.
Ooh, boy.
Well, it was there was not volatility because none of it was processed.
Oh.
No, there was no gasoline or stuff like it. Most of it
right.
was heavy oil or in drums, and but some of it was in the bulk.
Yeah.
Now later on, and we had to clean up that oil that was in some of these compartments that it normally had ballast or something like that.
Isn't that?
But that's a different story.
Interesting. That's an interesting, very interesting story. I've never heard that.
So anyway, we pulled out at New York Harbor, and it was if my memory's correct, it was a 107 ship convoy.
Wow.
The 7 ships was escort. These were little escorts. And some of them, we had 3 planes. Now they had, the landing was on little escort.
Carrier.
No carrier, they were just small 150 foot, but they were slow planes.
Oh, I see. Oh, sure.
And the 3 planes were observation. But they could go tilt the landing and what have you, and the ship could pick them up on a winch out of the water and put them up on the landing strip. So we had 3 little escort vessels that each one had a biplane.
I'll be darned.
And that's all we could see.
Sure.
For anti-submarine. It took us 17 days to cross the Atlantic.
17. Oh my goodness!
And
that flat bottom ship.
Flat bottom ship.
Woo!
And when we were going over the area of where the Titanic hit and
Off
sank,
Newfoundland. Yeah.
they over the PA system, they said, well, we're entering now the area where the Titanic hit the iceberg and sank.
30 years earlier.
So this is your mark in history.
Boy, I'll say you are.
And I'm in the engine room, and this,
What was your rate?
At that time, I think I was a second-class engineman, a motor machinist, they call them
Motor
at that
machinist,
time.
yeah.
But the name later they call it engineman.
Right. Well,
But in the main engine room, my station was with these 900 horsepower diesel engines that on the LSTs.
do those have two engines?
Two engines,
Yeah.
900 horsepower each, 1,800 horsepower
Port and
was
starboard, yeah.
drive shaft. Drive shaft was about
Ooh, boy.
10-inch
Lots
piece
of
of
power. Lots of power. Yeah,
Power.
yeah. Now, aboard an LST, for people that don't know exactly what that was, you could carry tanks.
landing ship tank.
Yeah.
Later on, you're bringing me to that. Come D-Day, we had 19 Sherman tanks on our ship.
Wow.
And we get into, now I'm an American on an American ship under the British command, and we take Canadians in at Juno Beachhead.
Juno Beachhead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, you see, and we get there and we get into the landing. And we're right under that huge cliff that was honeycombed with about 175 millimeter or, they had that honeycomb, the Germans had this vertical cliff, and it was a half a block long, if not a block long. But there was over 100 honeycombs where they, from the backside, they had put little railroad track like 12 inches apart, and they would put the gun.
Run those guns in there.
And the gun would stick its nose out about 6 inches or something like that.
88 millimeter.
Looking at it from under it, wow, it was camouflage.
Yeah.
Perfect, you couldn't see a thing. But when that gun barrel would get past the camouflage, it'd be probably 6 inches, and then they could shoot from.
Sure.
But the Germans had over 100 guns in that cliff.
Now, wasn't that the cliff where our Rangers scaled?
It was a major deal.
Yeah.
Now, the history books will tell you that there's two destroyers. And these is mutiny. Normally it would have been mutiny. But these two young lieutenants took over. Somebody had chicken. Somebody was just chicken.
Yeah.
They chickened out combat.
Yeah.
Older men. They hadn't lived long enough or had lived too long, something. Anyway, the fear set in, and each of these two ships, the gunner's mates, took over. Young officers just took over.
Well.
Now, destroyers being what they are, the forward guns had rack because they didn't have complete freedom. The forward guns was for distance, but these same 5-inch 38 guns on the stern was anti-aircraft. Same caliber, same gun, same everything, but the configuration on the ship on the front bow was for distance. On the stern, they were anti-aircraft. Two young lieutenants, they turned these ships around and they back them into underneath that. Now they can view the
German position.
guns, gun emplacements, camouflage, and where the barrels will come out. But they were out just far enough that they could see the whole 100 of this, and nobody could see them. and they couldn't get the guns down because
Right.
they had leveled those seawater level.
Right.
And so we were closed and couldn't move. We had loaded with Canadians, and we were within from me to him, and we couldn't get in because of the destroyers was trying to kill the killers that was waiting for us.
My
And
goodness.
we sat there for over 36 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And we couldn't get in, and we had 19 Sherman tanks that the Canadians wanted
They needed that.
on the land, and we were almost as close as he and I are
Yeah,
sitting here.
right.
Went to this room anyway.
Isn't that something?
Of getting in. We couldn't get in
Yeah.
because of the destroyers and everything. And when that last gun was knocked out, the destroyers joined their fleet.
Right.
We then moved it, got it, and offloaded 19 Sherman tanks
Wow.
for combat
Wow.
at the Juneau beachhead.
Juneau. Right.
And that was a different beachhead.
Yeah.
So then we turned around, and that was later, we would cross the English Channel. I think, if you talk to, I'm one of the last survivors that's alive today, and everybody had a different story. But it was in the 70s,
Back and
trips
forth,
back and forth. But we were prohibited from writing anything down.
Oh yeah. Right.
But I kept a track because there was we called a dogging a door, and the shaft where you'd go into the engine room. I would close the shaft, and behind it, I would write,
Keep a tally.
keep a tally of how many times we crossed it.
How about that? Good for you.
And that's how come me to be able to say that it was in the 70s.
Right. Right. Now, were you under fire a lot?
Well, it was about the closest from England to France at this point. Where the Thames River dumps in to the North Sea. We could cross well, a mile. But some places we had to go 120 miles because we'd hug the coast of England.
I see.
The chalk cliffs right down, and hug the coast, and then cross at the safest place.
Oh yes. That is truly amazing, Herschel. I just, boy, oh boy, what experiences you have had. Now, after you say about 70 crossings, more or less, you carried tanks over every time?
Oh, we hauled everything new from England to France,
Okay.
wherever it was needed, and whatever because we could move anything. Trucks,
Sure.
ambulances, tanks,
Jeeps, everything.
we could haul anything get on this. Like I said, it was 19 tanks, Sherman tanks.
Yeah. That's a
It was
lot of
quite a load,
that's a lot of weight.
a lot of weight.
You bet.
But that was our delivery.
That was your main.
But we called ambulance, and now that was going. Everything was new. We hauled was from England to France. Coming back, they salvaged every engine that they could salvage from every plane, friend or foe, to salvage parts for rebuilding planes.
Right. Right.
So it was we called junk,
Sure.
and we hauled escapees, and babies were born with just people, and some of the women were ready for delivery, and we had babies born
Right.
on the trip with all of those 70-something trips. pick them up. Everything was new, went from England over, and everything that was salvageable, including human life,
brought back.
We brought back.
Isn't that something? Now, all right, so that was over a period, let's see, the landings were the 6th of June.
6th of June.
And over a period of time,
Till April the following year.
April the following year?
Yeah, April the following.
45.
45.
My goodness sakes.
And at that time, all of the operation had, the tanks and all this stuff was now being hauled different, under different things.
Sure.
Well, the supply of those tanks at that time, it was in England, is now depleted, and
Right.
so, but it was other things that we did do. And then it was April, I think it was, of 45. MacArthur's in the Pacific,
Yep.
and he's screaming for these LSTs, landing ship tanks, ships, to. So they bring back 17 remaining in England, 17 empty LSTs. Now we haul people. Okay, we had about 130 people was staff, but all of us had about 250 people on. So we were a passenger
Right.
hauling people. Now they were working passengers. And this was in April. 17 ships. We get out to the Atlantic at Spain, at Gibraltar. And we're about 3 days toward New York, and a storm comes. Well, now, LSTs were 5,000 ton capacity. But all that capacity was just hollow space.
Yes, right.
And like a cork. And the storm came, and we're just like 17 corks on boiling water.
Bobbing up and down.
So we have to survive one way or the other. And that's day and night. So you had to keep close enough for a convoy, but far enough
so
away that you don't.
Run into people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, one night I had earphones on, and there was a panic in the voice of forward lookout. Ship 100 yards in front of us, we're going to hit it. 100 yards in front, and I'm there. So I pull the engine control back, drop it in, and with that then, they said, all engines stop and reverse. Now I go into reverse. And the next thing I know, all I saw was khaki legs coming down this way. And that was the only time in my life I ever had a man to kiss me. The engineering officer comes over, and here I am with earmuffs, and they know that I'm listening now to all of this that's going on.
Sure, you know.
And I react before the mechanical. And they said that we missed about 100 feet at the very most.
That's what saved you. God bless you.
But I got a kiss.
You should have gotten a medal for that, a hero's award.
It's not even in my jacket.
Well, you know, that sort of duty, Herschel, was just incredible because people have no idea what it was like to be aboard a craft like that, as you say, an empty ship. It was just a shell because the center part of the ship was open for all the material and everything. But so you, after that close call, of course, you were still out in the Atlantic, right? At that point, you were still.
Well, we crossed the equator.
You went by the...
We tried 5 times, 5 storms. We rode out 5 storms.
Wow.
But every time we'd go to coast of Africa, we'd then
Cross to Brazil.
between storms, we tried to cross.
Right.
And next thing, no, storms there, we still had those 17 corks, so to speak. And we had to go back to the safety of the shore, the western shore of Africa.
Sure.
And we went down below the equator,
Yeah. Right.
crossed below the equator,
Yeah.
and came up where the Amazon dumps into the South Atlantic.
Sure.
And it's as calm as this floor, this rug right here.
Right, yeah.
And come up and take the ships into Virginia Beach, Virginia,
Right.
some of them, and Ocean View for the other. Norfolk is the big area that we took the ships in. Took them in, the same convoy of 17. They took off, let go these extra passengers that I told you we had. They shipped out or transferred. We were just, we hauled them for passengers.
Sure.
So anyway, they left the ships at Norfolk and Ocean View and Virginia Beach. And then we turned around and went down to the shipyards at New Orleans.
Oh, yes.
Where all of these LSTs were then brought. So now comes 30 days of time. I had asked for a transfer from the ship. They asked us, anybody wants to transfer off the ship,
Put in your request.
put your paper in.
Sure.
So I did. And the ship that I was on, the LST 522, that ended up to the Pacific.
Oh, it did.
But my transfer, we stayed on the ship for 30 days and worked on the ship while it was being updated at the Todd shipyards. Then the 30 days, the other people that were staying with the ship, they had their 30 days of leave, and they went back to the ship, and our replacements went back.
I see.
And then they shipped out and went to the Pacific.
Right.
I then got my 30 days of leave, and I went on to a LST 692.
Okay.
So I went aboard the ship 692, and it was just, well, it was like walking into this building here. Once you get orientated, everything was organized. But it wasn't organized for when you walked aboard. Walked aboard this ship, and it's at Portsmouth, Virginia, and shipyard there, and looked at the deck, and they had, for the sake of just illustration, you walked aboard the ship, and there was, like your fingers, there was a paint mark, color. You were given a name tag, and you had, at the deck, you could see all the colors. And when those colors from where you entered and left the ship, it terminated or started. And if you didn't have the color on the finger on here, you didn't. Well, immediately, I was not dumb. I could smell there's a reason. Well, 90 days later, their first atomic bomb was let go. And then 5 days later, or the fourth or fifth days later, it was the second one.
Right.
And then it terminated.
So we're talking August 1945.
August of 45. And within 3 days after the first bomb, the second bomb. And then within 3 days of that, we were all called quarterdeck and told, when you go back, pack everything, get ready to go transfer.
Right.
And they did. So we all, and he said, if it's a handkerchief and it's wet and you don't want it, either put it in your pocket or throw it in the trash can, but don't throw it overboard or anything like that.
Right.
Because once you leave, it's a one-way deal. And all of our, there was 3 of us that ended up on another ship together. And most of them, but we were all different rates and different names. And nobody could have picked out, but we were friends. So we ended up on a second
Immediately.
ship.
Sure.
And then we ended up on a third ship and went down to Green Cove Springs, Florida.
Oh.
And we got there was about 100 ships in Green Cove Springs. And that was in, I think, July, August, or something like that. And I stayed through Christmas, Green Cove Springs. And when I left there, we had mothballed 1,000 vehicles at Green Cove Springs, Florida. And that meant, you know, sucking out all the moisture, putting this
Right.
moist-proof stuff and cosmoline on all the parts that might be rusted. But they ended the career there as a well. We mothballed them and put them in a graveyard, but it wasn't a graveyard. It was, of course, comes Korea, Vietnam, all of that, and then they could bring in all these ships. Today, you go to Green Cove Springs, Florida, where I was there when there was less than 100 ships, and when I took my discharge and left the Navy, there was 1,000 vessels in Green Cove Springs, Florida. Today, you go up to the ramp where we had, there's a size of a piece of paper, and that's the history, and I just got through telling you. That's the only evidence. It's all done completely away with. There's not, you'd never think that I saw 1,000 vehicles there.
I know, Herschel, that is so typical of the activity at the time, and the whole country was caught up in the spirit, of course, and the mass production and everything, and all the materiel that we had. And then, as you say, to go back now, and there's no reminiscence of it.
It's just like going into a chalkboard of a classroom.
Right.
When you
It's
went
been
into
wiped
school.
off.
They took the eraser, went up,
Sure.
and erased it off.
Right. Now, where did,
Chalkboard's there, but there's no writing on it, no pictures.
how about that? Where did you finally, when you got enough points and got out, where were you then?
What was there? Where was I?
Or what and where? Where were you? Yeah.
I was in Green Cove Springs, Florida.
Okay, that was in Florida.
I took my discharge.
That's where you took your discharge.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. And you were what, second class by that time, or
No, I was
third class?
I was first class.
Oh, you made first class.
I made first class.
3. Yeah, good
and
for
then,
you.
And then I was first class when I went aboard that last ship.
I see.
And then
You had big responsibility as first
yes,
class.
and then I made chief 2 months before I was 21 years old.
Oh, you did. Oh, you made CPO. Good
I made
for you.
CPO.
Good for you.
I was 20 years and 10 months old when I made the chief.
And how old were you when you went in Navy?
I was 17.
17. So you had to get your parents' signature, didn't you?
Yes. My father worked on the railroad, and my father had a job in Oak Ridge, Tennessee,
Oh, yes.
at Rockwood, Tennessee. My father handled the rail traffic and of all of this building up of your atomic plant
Oh, yes.
at Oak Ridge,
Yes,
Tennessee.
Yes.
My father at Rockwood was in charge of rail traffic from 1942. Now, the Oak Ridge, Tennessee deal was 1942.
Okay, right.
And then this, we're now talking now
That was the beginning
about
of it.
46,
That was
47.
the beginning of it. That you have lived so much history. It's just amazing, the different points through your career.
Well, okay. I'm going to fast forward. How much time we got?
We're okay.
we were in England on the 5th of August. And we had loaded up of I think 90-something British ambulances.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 5th of August, and at the above the old London Bridge. Now the London Bridge is now out in the desert in Arizona.
Yes, I know.
But this, we just had gone under it, or through the passageway, with 90-something ambulances. And the British drivers were all stripped to their waist or what have you, and sunbathing, what have you. And I was on the watch. Now, aboard our ship, we had one extra man, the crew, for the main engine room. We had one extra man, but everybody else, when they were down there, were working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one at a time, on rotating,
You'd rotate.
you'd go to the top side, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or something like that, to get a breath of fresh air.
Sure.
And then after everybody had gone to top side, they came back, and
Right.
so nobody violated their time.
Yep.
Everybody would go up. I was up, and we were at Gray's Inn, England. I go to the top side, and I look, and here's a V-1 rocket comes out of Europe.
Oh my gosh.
And I looked at it, and it's the prettiest little biplane you ever saw, just a toy.
Fire coming out of the
and
tail.
It came out of Germany.
Yep.
And here we are, and I remember at that point the Thames River was going east-west,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that plane came off of ramps and went up over us. Well, I'm looking at it, and I look at it, and it goes at approximately 7 miles. The tip of the wing touched the steel cable of a barrage balloon, because they big balloons there to keep the German
Sure.
aircraft up. The tip touched that, and that thing
Sure.
did that.
Threw it off course.
And my time was up on that deck to get back down. So I went down below. About 3 minutes later, that thing had traveled approximately 7 miles where its direction, because the steel cable, the wing tip touched the steel cable, and it came back. Now I saw it start back. I
Oh,
didn't
my
stay there
goodness.
and cheat. I went down. Within 3 minutes, it had hit our ship, the first ship, modern warfare, hit with a rocket.
For heaven's sake.
And it was on the Thames River.
My goodness sakes.
Now, it almost wiped out everything and everybody
Yeah.
on the main deck. I missed by about 3 minutes' time.
Isn't that something?
Now,
You
when
were
I
below deck.
when I got into the engine room, the explosion had knocked off all of these oil covers for these 900 horsepower engines. And each of the engines had 6 covers, 3 on the V8, V12s, and like this. And so everybody that was in the engine room was gathering up cover that was about 2 feet by 3 foot, because that explosion blew the oil covers off, and that oil was 180 degrees,
Wow.
and those rocker arms was throwing oil. So you got that. So we got the engines secured, oil and that. And that was the first time I ever saw the officers get oil soaked or anything like that. They come down to see what was happening, and the damage, and there they saw how we were fighting for our life to get these oil covers on those engines to save
course.
oil.
Oh my
what have you.
goodness. What a terrible experience, my goodness sakes. And you were lucky, you were below deck at that time.
I was about 3 minutes. I
Oh.
missed death by about 3 minutes.
And what were the casualties? Do you remember how many?
We had Army because we had the drivers for the vehicles.
Oh, I see.
All the ambulance drivers.
But some of your crew were lost as well.
Some of our crews and some of the, they were lost.
Oh my goodness
And,
sakes.
and it was on the Thames River
Yeah.
in
London, right.
south of London, halfway
Yeah,
between
London and the
and the
coast.
sea.
yeah. My goodness
But I
sakes.
saw that thing, first one
Yep,
come out of England.
yes. I've heard people talk about seeing those and hearing those things and hearing the motor on them, hearing the motor of the V.
Well, it looked like a light at night. It looked like a lightning bug and sounded like an outboard motor.
How about
That's the
that?
only way I can describe it.
How about that? Isn't that something?
But this one happened.
Yeah. Any other interesting experiences that you've had that you can recall?
Well, I don't know. You stop that right now, and I'll see what I can do. Then I'll.
Okay.
As everybody knows, the invasion started on June the 5th or 6th.
Yeah, right.
Okay. We loaded up on June the 1st, 1944. And but it was for just routine for us. There is a book, and I've got a copy of it myself, that a group of people like you got together, and they said there's been nothing written about what took place in England from where the Thames River dumps into the North Sea, on up to Scotland.
Right.
Well, that is where we loaded up, and that was where we offloaded and unloaded shipload after shipload of combat-ready troops. Now, I told you earlier, that it was everybody's struggle to get 10 operations. 10. You get 10 landings and retrieved. You got a star, a ribbon with whatever marking it was, and that represented $10. So everybody was eager beaver.
Right.
There was no.
You wanted to build that up.
You built that up, and everybody knew what it was. But there was also a 10-mile walk. When we'd offload an LST, what we'd do is we would go in, offload, and we'd go back to a staging area, and then we'd go out to sea and go 10 miles up. And then sometimes we'd pick up our same group that we just had left off, or maybe it was another LST that was in front of us, and get back. But that represented 10-mile embark, disembark, and 10 miles apart. That represented one mark on your, but 10 of them, you got a ribbon, and from that time on, it was $10 a month battle ribbon. So this is what all this activity was. From where the Thames River dumped into the North Sea.
English Channel, right.
Up. And it was, for me, I always wondered why there's nothing in print. There is now in print. About 5 years ago, there was a group of people got together, and they made a study because they knew of this history of activity. And I have got the book, a copy of the book that was given to me about this activity that took place from the Thames River. And it's within the last 5 years of the research was done, and the book has been published.
How about that?
And I've got a copy of it.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So anyway, I've studied some of
Of course.
this confirmed.
Sure.
Now, if you want to stop at this point.
And through these interviews like you, we uncover things like this that we had not known about before, and it's very,
Well, there
very
is-
important.
It is a book, it's been published about that, what activity that took place from the Thames River all the way up to Scotland.
What was it like being in England? Did you have any contact with the English people, or
We had, yes, we had.
when you had liberty, did you go into a town or
Yeah,
anything like that?
we were invited into homes.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah,
Yes.
and we visited some homes.
Sure.
But there again, you see, a ship would come in, with ours, like I said, there'd be 100 people. And people would take 2 or 3. And the 3 of us that always wait, there's safety in numbers.
Oh,
And
yes.
there was Hall, Hines, and Hutchins.
3 H's.
And Hines was a electrician, and Hutchins was an electrician, and me, I was an engineman.
How about
So
that?
I didn't know.
You 3 guys?
But the 3 of us, when we would go on Liberty,
Right.
you know,
Stay
Now-
together.
now, the war was not over. It was over for us, but it wasn't over. And then came the Battle of the Bulge
Mm-hmm.
and Christmas.
That was December of 44.
December 44. We were, is this going now? Our ship was slated to be given to the British,
Uh-huh.
and but it hadn't been turned over. It was going to be at Liverpool.
Okay.
So for the week before and more, every nut, bolt, screw was inventoried, and it's same as when it came out of the shipyard, we got replacements for it, and so when it was given to the British, it would be ready to go, and if anything broke, there'd be a spare part in it.
How about that?
Okay, so we get up to Liverpool, 19th of December, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge. Everybody heard about
Oh,
that. We, Hines, Hall, and Hutchins, we walked over a mile from the ship to get us a good fish and chip dinner because the next meal we was going to get was in New York.
Oh, boy.
We walked this, and so we asked a shipyard worker, where could we have the best fish and chip? And he says, you go to the exit, and there's 2 roads. You take the left road 1 mile up. It's the best that's in England and Scotland.
How about that?
We go up there, and here's your walk. Go in, and we said, one of the shipyard workers sent us up here, the best fish and chips in all of England and Scotland. He says, fine. We said, give us a to-go order. So we said yes, of course. Now they had been taken with GIs, would go in and order and get the stuff and go not without paying. But he said, this has to be paid first. He said, I've had too many to come in and walk out. And he said, I hate to say it, but fellas, you got to do it. But we're just a 3. We don't get delivery on this fish and chip dinner. That's approximately 1 mile from the ship in Scotland. And he brings them over, but he's got them, but they got given to us. Here 3 men come in the door, and they're home guard.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, you 3, are you from the 522? And 522 was the ship number. And we just had tied up down the dock. And so the 2 of them looked at me, and I said, well, if we were, we would not tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, one's name's Hall and one's name's Hutchins, and he gives the 3 names.
I'll be darned.
And he said, let me see ID. He said, hey, that's us. He says, get your fannies back to the ship, it's emergency recall.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's how we get back to the ship. Now we take our time.
Did you get your fish and chips?
Yeah, we got the fish and chips.
Okay.
But they said to the man, give them a good order. This is their last meal in Scotland for a
How
while.
about that?
And so anyway, we got the fish and chip, and they said, now double time it back. Well, we ran for a quarter of a mile, and then we
Sure.
took time to eat. And as we get down there the crane has got down, ready to remove all your ingress and egress. So three of us go over, our feet touches the main deck, and the crane picks up the planking, and we're underway, and we got down into the engine room. Now here we are in our Sunday best.
Sure. Dress uniform.
And we're on watch. So we get ourselves back into work clothes and get spare parts and everything. And now we're only 100 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And to get down to and pull into a makeshift landing.
Mm-hmm.
And the trucks pull in, as we said, there's no OSHA man in all of the world would have shot himself if he had seen what we did to get that oil and fuel and everything. But we hauled fuel and oil for the Army over at the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the trucks met us at the high water, or low water, where we could get it. We hauled it across, and then the Patton's Army had trucks and stuff there at the Battle of the Bulge.
Well, isn't
So
that something?
from the 19th of December
Yeah.
of 1944 through the Christmas holiday and New Year's,
Oh, yeah.
we hauled fuel and everything for a hospital and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and the 24th of December was storms and everything like you never thought
The weather
ever
was
existed.
just horrible. Yeah.
Easter Sunday, come Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the day before Christmas, sky clears up and what have you.
You get the airplanes up.
And the most
yeah.
beautiful thing in the world was those P-38s and P-51s,
Yes, sir.
P-52s, flying cover.
Right.
They 4 or 5, and we watched it from where we were.
Mm-hmm.
The planes would go, and when they'd go this way, and they'd spot German, they'd be like this, and the low man here was his turn, and he was aerial. And as the Germans now had been uncovered, the German army had taken into the woods, and they took all of the greenery, and they put the green, and then when it snowed, then the only thing was the weather changed.
Sure.
And then these German tanks came out of the woods, and they didn't, it was icebergs. And then now the planes were back in the air, not a cloud in the sky, and we'd see these P-38. They patched through voice what audibly what was going on from plane to plane. With the rheostat, they put it on the PA system, and we could hear the calling what their names were, and it's your turn, and they peeled off like this, and they'd peel like this way, and these put distance in, and the low guy down here did. So here we were, anywhere from 10 to 15 miles away watching the Battle of the Bulge, and but we had hauled fuel for our ground troops.
Sure.
And now we were over there as they were knocking out all of the, so I saw, but from a distance,
How about that?
we viewed the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh my goodness sakes. Well, Herschel, that's just amazing. You have had some of the most eye-watering experiences, and to be an observer such as you with a sharp memory and to be able to relate all that sort of thing, it's just absolutely invaluable. So then when you eventually, then after, then you came back, of course, and you were in Greenwood, Florida, Greenwood Springs, is it?
Green Cove Springs.
Okay, Green Cove Springs. And that is where you finally you got your walking orders.
Todd Shipyards.
At the shipyards there.
Todd
Right,
Shipyards.
right there. Then what? Then you took a train back to Ohio. How did you get home?
I went to Great Lakes. My discharge, I went into the Navy at Great Lakes for basic training.
Right.
And I came back to Great Lakes.
You were discharged from
and that's
Great
where we
Lakes.
were discharged from. Separation papers.
Okay, fine and dandy. Now, I missed out in the earlier hour of your conversation, but you had finished high school, had you, before you went in?
No, I dropped out of high school. And I welded out here at 2339 Coleraine Avenue at the year I was 16 and 17.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I went into the Navy at 17.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay, so you came back to Cincinnati, then what happened? You got married or what?
No, I went to school, Veterans Accelerated Method up at Hughes High, the basement of Hughes High, and you could take up to 3 subjects. And there was 3, 4, or 5 instructors from the Board of Education, and they had their desk, and you'd go as far as you could go, and you'd get in line, and you'd go to the instructor and say, you know, I've hit a blank wall. And they'd help you over that. Sure. But you couldn't take more than 3 subjects.
I see.
And then you'd come down right over here to 9th Street at Board of Education at 9th and Sycamore.
9th and Sycamore.
And sit there with everybody else, and you couldn't cheat because there was always an empty seat on your left, right, in front of you, and behind you.
Sure.
And you'd take that seat, and you couldn't see.
And nobody could cheat from you or anything.
You couldn't cheat, or they couldn't cheat.
Right, exactly.
But you'd taken all page number and everything else.
Sure,
You'd qualified by the instructors.
Right.
That you qualified for the final.
Well,
and I ended up with 23 high school credits.
Wonderful. Good for you.
And then comes the 2 mailman. I get 2 postcards. I'm accepted into the University of Cincinnati, and I'm accepted into the Cincinnati Police Department. Now, what do you do? So got down for about almost a month, and I had put lines down the middle of the page, for and against, pro, con, all the other stuff, trying to argue with myself. And then I concluded, well, I need a job, I have to eat, I haven't had any income, $65 a month, and I've got to have increase my income.
Absolutely.
So I'll take the job because I can always go back to school.
That's right. Very good.
But I never did.
And how long in the police department? 35 years?
33 years.
33 years. Well, honest to goodness, that is just wonderful. And you've raised a family?
Well, I was only blessed with 1 child.
1 child?
And
that's great.
It was the doctors gave us choice. If you had more children, you got a perfect child.
Yep.
But you can't. the mother, we don't know whether the mother can survive another child or not.
Exactly.
So we decided, terminate take perfection.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
she's got a master's degree and everything else.
Well, you're certainly blessed. I tell you, it's been a wonderful story. We're coming to the end of our time here now. We thank you for your tremendous contribution, not only during the war, but as a civilian, as a police officer in Cincinnati, your wonderful contribution to our community. And we want to thank you for all of that, and God bless you. It's been an honor for me to get to meet you and talk with you.
Thank you.
And we're at the
And
end of it.
I'll see you out at the Old Man's
I'll see you
Club.
out there. Right, exactly.